Good morning, afternoon, whatever. My name is Gabriel Nicosia, and I'm the King of Orion. How y'all doing today? Hopefully your day's off to a better start than mine's been. I haven't really been getting a lot of done so far today. I've got an 11 o'clock appointment I need to hit, so I'm sticking around base camp for now. I got a donation from a corporation named ODIN, ODIN, and the character who passed the goods along had a couple of different tunes, but I know him as Allfather, which, terribly appropriate for a corporation named Odin. Suggests a lot of planning and not necessarily posturing, but a knowledge of what they hope to become or attain. And I'm a big fan of Norse mythology just in general, though I tend to fall more in with like the Morrigan and those types of stories. Neil Gaiman does a pretty good treatise, or a pretty good telling of a lot of the stories, and he's been getting a lot of flack for being into what he's into, which, yeah, that dirty nasty consent is essential. Consensual? Anyway, I need to head into Jita. I'm going to grab Rowdy and pull her in to Clover and show the goods off. But first, here is my baby. This is the Rosie, the Rowdy, the Rifter. I have the best Rifter in all of New Eden, which is a very silly thing to have. But it's like the Little Prince. You name something and it becomes special to you. And so, this is Rosie. Anyway, I'm stationed at Ignoiton, mostly for Operation Ignition. I'm going to start reading those off so anybody can play. You don't need to know how to read. Besides, the schools for that kind of thing need to be at least 3 times as big. Is this a school for ants? I'm sorry, I'm educated by the internet, made of memes. It's going to take 3 jumps to get to Clover. In the meantime, I'm just going to rant and ramble and sort of talk about corporations at large. Now, AOA has been getting a lot of flack for expanding. And mostly there's a degree of xenophobia that goes into that. But AOA fights dirty. Not fights dirty. They know what they're about. They use battleships to good effect. Because New Eden, or at least Eve Echoes, is a very top-heavy game at the moment. Folks aren't using the assets where they're actually most efficient or most valuable. I got a bee here that's kind of harassing me, but what I should do is take the next 2 hours and read. But I don't want to, because, I don't know, peace doesn't feel right now. And a lot of that's agitation for agitation's sake. Folks get wrapped up in movement and moving just to move. Most of the problems that exist in the world probably wouldn't if people would just sit still and breathe for a bit. But I don't want to this morning. Mainly because of like a weird interaction that I had yesterday afternoon after I got done recording all of the things and writing all of the things. But yeah, I've already kicked off Operation Cakewalk, got a little bit less than a minute. We'll just let Rosie fly for a bit, if y'all want to. I like to check things out as I go by. When we get to Jita, I'll do a little people watching. Spaceships and spreadsheets. I was looking at the analytics for the channel, and it looks like mostly older men are into this game, which it actually seems... Ooh, a Garmer. It makes sense. That's not a Garmer. Alright, we're just gonna go inside. It's, things come in waves. Folks hope for the future, or they long for the past. And the kind of people who are into this game, the Star Trek crowd, the sci-fi folks, they don't really have any good kids' stories to point to. There isn't a lot of youth coming up wanting a brighter tomorrow. They're just, they're living in the sci-fi world. They're actively engaging with this strange mix between cyberpunk and post-apocalyptic. Anyway, here are the ships that ODIN donated. And I don't really have any use for any of these, so they'll probably end up either getting given away before the month is out, or sold. But first off, we've got Condor Interceptor. Great for running goods through bubbles, but also like as an outrider or scout for ships of the line for main fleets. If you're an Omega, the Condor Interceptor, or any interceptor really, is good for, the sort of fleet support, scouting, surveying. But they also make really good explorers, because you don't have to worry about bubbles or gate camps or things like that. You can just cruise on through into nullsec. And they've got the 3 mid slots that you're looking for to actually get the job done. And they make really good tackles. If you look at the Warp Disruptor Optimum Range, they've got good long points. A lot of folks tend to invest, what are those? There's an implant that'll make it so your missiles can apply warp disruption as well. That's a really good build for them. Very effective, because not only are you dishing out a little bit of damage and tickling your opponent, you're actually locking them down and holding them in place. But they're not the best tackle out there. Where Condors shine is as a missile platform. Generally, they want to be gliding along at a long range, circling their prey, lobbing missiles 20 kilometers or so, and just tickling them from afar, and watching and waiting. Watching, waiting, black and white surveillance. I hope that nothing's going wrong. I hope that nothing's going. Great song. So that's not bad for an appetizer. Condor's a good frigate. Breacher Assault. Interesting thing about the Breacher Assault, and assault frigates in general, Alphas can fly them, but they don't have access to the roll bonuses. Those only go to Omegas because they rely on Advanced Micro Warp Drive, Advanced Frigate Command, Advanced Frigate Defense, and all of those are built for a very particular kind of rush, crash, tackle that doesn't actually see a lot of use, because the sort of prey that an assault frigate wants, cruisers primarily, isn't really used for ratting, or isn't really used for general operations, even though cruisers are the best ships in the game for general operations. The folks who play Eve Echoes at the moment have invested a lot of time and money and are very top heavy. They love them some battleships. Battle cruisers are the lightest, and an assault frigate, it can engage a battle cruiser, especially a ratting battle cruiser, but it's going to have a hard time keeping them down and surviving. You get about 2 minutes of staying power. So the goal of an assault frigate is to rush in, get in their face as quickly as possible. You use your damage control to soak any oncoming as you crash in to orbit at close, and then you stay on their face. You scram them, you tackle them, you do your best to stay outside of the range of their weapons. It's important to adjust your orbit distance, well, between shots if you can, but really to try and maximize your defenses. If they're a turret, you want to get in close and move quickly under their defenses. They love micro warp drives, but scramblers are so ubiquitous that they don't really see a lot of use. I like to run my frigates and breachers and tackles with dual prop. So an afterburner, a micro warp drive, and a damage control unit. And then all of the tackle, all of the E-War, whatever it takes to keep that sucker alive. I don't really do PvP a lot. There are a lot better folks out there for that, though most of them have left the game. Vromire is really good at that. My favorite from back in the day was actually this dude named Creamy. Creamy's hunting blog was really good. No voice, no vocals, you had to read the videos. But he did a good breakdown of like how to hunt with the basest elements, how to hunt without red scanners. And a lot of the things that he talked about back then, still applicable today, evergreen content, evergreen, because it was when the game was brand new and it didn't have a lot of the things that make things easier now. You can actually use the map, the star map, star charts, to track down what systems people are ratting in. One of the filters, I believe, shows not ships destroyed in the last hour. That one's really good for finding gate camps. That's this one towards the bottom. For anybody that's looking, I'm sorry that the glare is a thing. But in particular, pirate base is destroyed. Faction colony, no, cosmic anomaly, disruption, distribution. And that's not the one. That's good for figuring out where different things can be found. Pirate strongholds destroyed in the last so-and-so. Alright. Now if you look into nullsec, those pirate strongholds, that's where your rats are at. That's where the people who are out there ratting are doing their thing. But they don't... It's in the last day or so, I believe. So like the high intensity zones, the red zones, go hunt there. You're going to find a fight. You're not going to win the fight if you're, going in unprepared. But if you go in stealthily with a stealth bomber or a covert ops cruiser or something that'll has high degrees of survivability, you'll probably end up finding capital ships and big old whales and AOA or other major corporations, big old PvP corporations, ODSF for example. That's pay dirt. That's targeting. That's finding places to operate out of. Most folks will rely on filaments to just have them have their PvP ships randomly dropped in, and that's good for instant action, relatively instant action. The best source of instant action still doesn't work, unfortunately. Faction war games. I wish. Anyway, I was talking about the Breacher Assault though, and yeah, it's a good little frigate for that sort of crash, smash, tackle. You want a wolf pack of those guys. Reason being, most folks who see a gang drop in on their face, they're going to focus fire on the first one. Nice. And they might blap it, they might delete it off the board, but to have backup ships, really any gang, any superior number of bodies has a distinct advantage over even capital ships. It really doesn't take much. 3, 4, 5 dudes in battleships or frigates and the combination of the two. I would even argue down to destroyers and the like. If you really optimize and focus fire on specific builds, you'd be surprised what you can doctrinally get done. Anyway, he gave me also a Daredevil, which is pretty friggin' dope. I love the Daredevil line. I love railguns overall. Railguns are probably the best weapon type overall. They give great damage. Not as good damage as lasers, but they're a lot more forgiving than lasers. They're more damaging than cannons, but they're less forgiving than cannons. So cannons, most folks who do PvE rely on cannons because they have a lot of, not hang, but lob. So the effective range of a cannon is a lot more fluid, and the numbers that show up on the screen are a lot less reliable. You can shoot objects well outside the effective range of a cannon if you get really lucky. Meanwhile, railguns are a lot more damage within a constraint. Not as much as lasers, but they're a lot less constrained as lasers, but their crits are just as juicy. I like auto-cannon crit builds because, cannons, machine guns, and guns go burr, and I like big blue numbers and spikes. But really, any of the implants or any of the weapons has an area or an operational need where it can shine. Most PvPers love lasers. The Succubus gets a lot of love. Fiends get a lot of love. nightmares to a certain extent, but they love lasers because they're the best damage in the game, even though they have the most limited range. And if you go beyond that range, or if you dodge, it's less effective. Daredevil's right in the sweet spot, and like, I don't know too much about faction frigates other than not the Azrael. I named it Azrael. It's the not the Ashamu, though I want an Ashamu someday. I'd like to explore a lot more capacitor warfare. But like, PvP isn't really about the dance. It's just about smash, grab, kill, get it done. Which, you know, most games where competitive populations control the game degenerate to that point. It no longer becomes a mode of expression. It becomes a demonstration of mastery, which that's one way to play, but it's not the most interesting, in my opinion. But yeah, let's see. Daredevils have really good webs. Go watch Benzi's stuff for the actual breakdown of these ships. Most of it's still good. His builds are... Builds. Alright. Also got a Stabber Fleet issue. These are probably my favorite cruisers in the game. Now, you can fly them as an alpha. You're not going to get any of the bonuses as an alpha, but you don't really want the bonuses. You don't need them. What you want a fleet issue cruiser for is something that can be dished out freely and readily. Mass-produced. They're fleet issue. They're made to be ships of the line. So if you have 2 fleet issues, congratulations. You can take on any faction cruiser to some degree with some measured success. You can at the very least give them a fight. Now, if they're blinged out, you're probably going to, you know, run into trouble. But, like, you can take a swing at them. With 10 high slots combined for 2 fleet issue cruisers, that's a lot of high slots. And 5 high slots alone is really good for a cruiser. I fit mine as general purpose cruisers. I usually do 2 to 3 mining lasers, which most PvPers would hear that and they'd laugh, or like, what the hell are you doing, man? You're losing out on DPS. But the damage you dish when you're doing PvE determines how long you loiter within the system. So, if I want to do a snatch and grab or some sort of survey operation in AOA space, for example, I would go to Shibolba Point, because that's the nearest base that I have to AOA space. I would use a Stabber Fleet issue equipped for PvP and DPS. So, medium auto cannons, 5 of them in a suite, with the implant that I have, and with maybe a gyro stabilizer, though it's not necessarily useful. I might actually put like a tracking computer to increase the range of those cannons, even though like it's short range and you're leaning in to cover the weaknesses of the weapon itself. Instead of maximizing the effectiveness of the weapon, I usually build and fit to minimize the weakness, which is a very different approach. And it allows for a more flexible engagement profile. So you can go into Tech 10 and tango with small aircraft, even as an alpha, flying one of those. Whether you do it successfully or not depends on their tackle and a lot of other factors. But you have the DPS, and ideally you have the speed and repairs needed, whether you go shield, which I don't recommend, shield just in general, or armor. You would have the sustain to hang and like get work done. I prefer destroyer snipers for trying stuff that's well beyond like the capability profile of an actual ship, and I might do an Omega video on like that special snipers. But yeah, fleet issues are great because you can use them even as an alpha. They're like right on the line. They are the very tippy top of what an alpha can hope to fly, and the very baseline, bare minimum of what an Omega should be flying with, you know, what they have. Also a Wreath, which is excellent. Now, I love hauling rocks, but you don't really need to haul stuff in low or high sec, because, you know, You've got the delivery system and those lines of supply. You trickle from the individual stations up to the ITCs, from the ITCs to wherever you manufacture from. In my case, the Freelands out at Istedard. And like, those lines of supply are really good. However, if you want to move things on your own, like, the wreath is really good for that. I generally optimize the warp velocity, and the align time is the dream. But you can build a wreath however you want. Like, they're very flexible. The mammoth is a golden goddess. You can actually build the wreath to be a ghetto strip miner of sorts. So strip miners are really good for clearing out entire belts, right? But if you want a very specialized and individual rock, having mining lasers on a wreath or a mammoth will let you camp there for 5 to 6 hours. So they're really good for setting up targets for people to come engage with. You can fish really easy with these. They're great bait, a mammoth or a wreath, especially if you've got folks who are ratting nearby, doing PvE while you have that target out there for folks to focus fire on, and you can just crash on anybody that comes in to engage. Folks need to consider, like, what's the juicier target in any engagement. You can set up bait for people to come and attack. If you've got the tunes available, why not? And it's free money too. Like, people talk about how bots are bad. Okay, well, they're targets. Targets are not bad. I don't care if they're rocking civilian gear. Like, good. We want more targets. We want more ships flying. I want more deployable destroyables. Okay. And then also, too, a Sigil 2. So, transport ships, tier 2, like, not tier 2, these upper level transport ships that have the ability to use covert ops cloaking devices are really fun. They're really good for running blockades. There are certain ship classes, bodyguards in particular, that will crush most smaller covert ops cloaking device ships. The bummer is transporting stations is not a very high ops tempo operation, which means these sort of industrial ships, they're very overvalued, overpriced. If you want a daily driver, a mammoth will do you so much better than a Sigil or a Sigil 2. However, it is a lot less survivable. Then again, the Sigil or the Sigil 2 or any of the player-owned station transport ships that are available out there, like, they're very specialized. And me as a pilot, I prefer my things generalized. I am something of a jack of all trades. My goal is to, like, experience as many things as widely as possible, because diversity leads to new ideas, and variety is the spice of life. And Sigil 2 is kind of the opposite of that goal for me. But it's still a really, really good ship. And the market value for it, $500 million. They're $500 million available on the market. But the resting bitch price is between 81 million and $500 million. That'll give you some indication of the level of interest that exists for these ships out in the wild. The closer that sell price is to the buy price, like the narrower that margin, the greater the level of interest within that range. So you can generally sell things on the market anywhere between what the resting bitch price is up top and the resting demand price is on the bottom. Generally, shooting smack dab in the middle is, most likely to lure folks if there is interest. But there's a lot of dead niches, which is great for people who want to get into the game. It means there's a lot of modules out there that are unexploited. Scrap reprocessing is a really good way to make money, like, really easy. You don't even have to leave the station. You could park in Jita in a pod, and if you've got the seed money, either from the plex that the game gives you to start, just for jumping through the tutorials, the 100 or so, whatever it rounds out to, selling that at a good rate, and then just using that to buy modules, scrap reprocess them. So long as you're paying less than you're making, good rule of thumb is tritanium's worth 1, pyrite's worth 2, and you just do that back in the napkin math for each module. You reprocess them and you flip the minerals and sell them at a competitive rate. If you sell trit at 1 from Jita, maybe it sells, but if you sell trit at 1 from near Jita, almost guaranteed. If you sell trit at 1 anywhere far away from Jita, folks will eat that up. I eat it up. Like, out in Istidart especially, there's this supplier in Paytor that's constantly selling minerals at reduced rate. There's actually a pretty active mining community out near Cake Island. And mostly they stick to high sec. Occasionally they'll adventure out into low sec. So if you're looking for prey, like, they don't have a lot of fancy toys and they're not, super interesting. But yeah, that's where the miners are at. Same for, not a Stingray, though that's where most of my storytelling and operations, Lost Isle is out there in Stingray. But like, there's a lot of different neighborhoods in New Eden, and each of them has their own vibe. And if you look to the markets and where the minerals are being sold from, that gives an indicator of the sort of operations that are going down out there. Now, compressed minerals can be found, not compressed minerals, excuse me, compressed ore. Compressed minerals are essential for moving minerals from place to place, and that's a whole topic in its own right. But compressed ore can be found anywhere. Like, you don't need to, to camp a specific location. So generally blue scanning and looking for that sort of thing is the best bet for an alpha and an omega, so long as they're willing to roam. Of the ships that I received, the Stabber Fleet issue is my favorite, with the Wreath coming in second. Both are really good for exploration and just for moving things around, tooling around and looking for compressed spaces, both in null and low, and really any space, with the exception of maybe Waste Seeker, or I think Sleepers are only in Dormant Realms, which alphas no longer have access to. There was also a whole mess of planetary materials, these guys, and at about 350, 400 a pop, like, that's a healthy chunk of change. There aren't a lot of things that I build. Fiber composite is useful for some of the things that I build, but there's not a lot of stuff that like is useful overall. But they're really good assets to have and resources to flip, just in general. The planetary materials market is an omega only thing, and like where you place your planets kind of ties you down to a location. So it's not as, I used to really love it for my playstyle of going out into null, deep null, and just setting up shop, because that's where the best production is. But I find that like fuel, I usually focus fire on fuel and then use that to convert minerals, and then sell the minerals or sell the fuel itself. Like those are they're the easiest lines of income. If you're into production, focusing your planetary production on whatever you're trying to build is really useful. For the last vacation I took, I did that for ventures, mass-producing ventures. But like, I like to interact with the market, and manipulating the market is really fun too. Mostly manipulating the planetary materials market is extremely easy, because you can see where the interest lies. Remember that lower level of what people are willing to pay for a thing. If it's really low, if it's like 2 ISK, then like there's no interest in selling. So buy that stuff, punish that sort of gameplay and investment, or outbid them, buy stuff at 3. It's penny slots basically, and you're competing with folks who aren't really interested in the game anyway. So free money. And all of this sort of applies and exists within real life too. There's a lot dirt side that, like, if you pay attention, you can see where the interest lies and what people need. Especially if you listen to folks, they'll tell you what they want. And yeah. So thank you, Odin. Thanks, Allfather, for this generous gift. I'm definitely going to be taking advantage of it for the next excuse me, month or so. And then maybe down the line, next vacation, we'll see. The wreath is probably going to be the first one that I fit, just because I want to use it a couple times. The sigil 2 is extremely nice. I have absolutely no use for it. Without either getting into the production of player-owned stations, which maybe that's worth looking into, but honestly, that's something for a corporation to get into more than an individual player. And like, as huge as Orby is, welcome to Orby, by the way, we are not very direct, and most of our interactions have to occur through the market proper. So maybe if I started producing individual parts for stations, that might be worth looking into. I don't know, but it's a lot of options that I didn't have before. I mean, I did, but the Sigil 2 is the biggest one that I didn't have. All the rest I've got some version or iteration thereof, especially the Breacher, the Daredevil. I have it's not an Azrael. What's it called? Man, I love those Angel Cartel ships because of their warp speed. The warp velocity is a lot bigger picture and doesn't get a lot of love, which means you can get them pretty cheap. And they're really good for moving goods around in null, but especially in low and high sec. If you don't want to, deal with the delivery system. Though the delivery system's really fun in its own right. It's nice. I've been seeing a lot of posts about people turning Eve into an RTS, and yeah, you can play that way. It's a sandbox. You can play however you want. You can do an individual rogue trader story. You can recreate Firefly and have crews flying around in the black. You could do Star Wars. You could do whatever the hell you want. Whatever you do, I hope you have fun. And I hope you have a good day. Thanks for hanging with me. And thanks again to Odin. Talk to y'all later. Bye.